My name is Kristen Patterson, a 34-year-old accountant who thought integrity was valued until Warren Mitchell, our CFO, made me choose between my ethics and my paycheck. I refused to falsify financial records for our investor presentation, documenting everything meticulously instead. When he screamed that dates were just inconveniences, I never imagined my termination would become his downfall. I wonder if he regrets firing me now that my memo destroyed his career and saved countless investors. Before I tell you how I took down a corrupt executive who tried to ruin my reputation, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button. My journey into the world of corporate finance started with hard work and big dreams. After graduating with my MBA and earning my CPA certification through countless late nights of studying, I landed a coveted position at one of the Big Four accounting firms. Those first years were challenging but formative. I built a reputation for thorough, precise work and an unwavering commitment to proper accounting practices. Sure, it might sound boring to some, but financial integrity was something I took seriously. Numbers tell the truth when people might not, and I respected that honesty. When the opportunity came to join NexusWave Technologies as a senior accountant 3 years ago, I jumped at it. The tech startup had been gaining attention for its innovative cloud security solutions, and their growth trajectory looked promising. The compensation package was significantly better than what I was making at the accounting firm, and the equity options dangled the possibility of substantial wealth if the company continued its upward trend. But more than the money, I was excited about helping build something from the ground up and implementing proper financial controls in a growing company. My first day at NexusWave was everything I had hoped for. The modern office space in downtown with its floor-to-ceiling windows and sleek furniture screamed success. The CEO, Rebecca Torres, personally welcomed me during the company-wide morning meeting, emphasizing how critical solid financial management would be for their upcoming expansion plans. The energy was infectious, with engineers and marketing teams collaborating in open spaces and salespeople celebrating closed deals with small desk bells that rang throughout the day. My direct supervisor, Marcus Bennett, seemed knowledgeable and approachable. As the controller, he had been with NexusWave since its early days and knew every aspect of the financial operations. During our onboarding lunch, he expressed relief at having someone with my background join the team. "We need more structure as we scale," he explained between bites of his sandwich. "The company has been growing so fast that our financial processes haven't kept up. Rebecca and the board want us to prepare for potentially going public in the next few years." I was assigned to a small but dedicated accounting team. Jessica Alvarez, another senior accountant who had been with the company for about a year, became my closest colleague. Smart and detail-oriented, she helped me navigate the company culture and systems. "Most people here are great," Jessica told me during our first coffee break. "But just so you know, Warren Mitchell, our CFO, can be intense. He focuses a lot on hitting growth targets for the investors." I dismissed her warning at the time. Every CFO feels pressure to show strong performance. That comes with the territory. Besides, in my experience, most finance executives appreciated thorough work and accurate reporting, even if it sometimes meant delivering disappointing numbers. The first few months were busy but fulfilling. I revamped several accounting procedures, implemented better documentation practices, and helped prepare for our quarterly financial review. My recommendations were generally well received, and Marcus often complimented my thoroughness. As I settled into my role, I began to notice the company dynamics more clearly. Rebecca, the CEO, was charismatic and visionary, but somewhat removed from the financial details. She trusted her executive team to handle the operations while she focused on product strategy and investor relations. Marcus was technically skilled but sometimes conflict-averse, preferring to find middle ground rather than push back strongly. And then there was Warren Mitchell, the CFO. Warren had come from a larger tech company with a reputation for aggressive growth. In his mid-40s, he dressed impeccably in tailored suits that stood out among the more casual tech crowd. His presentations were polished, his speech confident, and his directives clear and non-negotiable. He rarely visited the accounting department, preferring to summon people to his corner office when needed. During my 3rd month, I had my first direct interaction with Warren when he requested a detailed breakdown of customer acquisition costs. After delivering my analysis, he barely glanced at the spreadsheet before asking, Can you rework these numbers to show a declining customer acquisition cost trend? The board is concerned about our burn rate. I can analyze if there are any subcategories where we are seeing improvements, I offered. But the overall trend is what I presented based on the actual data. He stared at me for a moment, then nodded curtly. Just see what you can do. We need to show improvement in this area. I left his office feeling uneasy, but convinced myself he was simply asking me to dig deeper into the analysis. Looking back, I should have recognized this as the first red flag. As the months passed, my reputation at NexusWave solidified. I was known for being meticulous and principled, reliable for accurate reporting, and thoughtful analysis. Most of the team appreciated my work, though I occasionally sensed frustration from those who wanted quicker, less thorough answers. The company continued its rapid expansion, opening new offices and hiring dozens of employees each month. Our customer base grew impressively, though I noticed that the revenue numbers did not always keep pace with the celebrated customer acquisitions. The pressure to show strong financial performance intensified as rumors of another funding round began circulating. What I did not realize then was that I was about to become entangled in a situation that would test my professional ethics, personal resilience, and ultimately change the course of my career in ways I never could have anticipated. The warning signs were there, subtle but present, if only I had been looking for them. But I was still riding the wave of excitement about being part of a rising tech star, believing that my professional standards would be valued rather than viewed as an obstacle. The quarterly financial review meeting, in the main conference room, marked a turning point in my perception of NexusWave. The executive team, department heads, and senior finance staff gathered to discuss our performance and projections. Warren stood at the front, clicking through slides of impressive growth charts and metrics. As you can see, he said, gesturing to a particularly steep curve, our monthly recurring revenue is accelerating at 28% quarter over quarter. At this rate, we will hit our annual target well before the fourth quarter. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. The revenue numbers he presented did not match what I had been working with. According to my calculations, we were showing closer to 20% growth, which was still impressive, but not the hockey stick curve on his slide. During the question period, I raised my hand. Warren, I am reviewing the revenue recognition timing for the Miller Systems contract. Since the implementation phase is not complete, should we be recognizing the full amount this quarter? The room grew quiet. Warren gave me a tight smile. The contract is signed and committed. The funds are guaranteed. We follow percentage of completion accounting, as you know. Yes, but our completion percentage documentation shows only 30% milestone achievement, not the 70% that appears to be calculated here. I replied, trying to keep my tone collaborative rather than confrontational. We can discuss the technical details offline, Kristen, Warren said dismissively. Next question. After the meeting, Marcus pulled me aside. That was a good catch on the Miller contract, he said quietly, but you might want to be careful about challenging Warren publicly. I was just trying to clarify the accounting treatment, I explained. The revenue recognition timing seems aggressive. Marcus nodded. I understand. Just bring these things to me first. Okay, Warren is under a lot of pressure from the board to show strong numbers before our next funding round. That conversation with Marcus was the beginning of my growing concern. Over the next few weeks, I began noticing more instances of aggressive accounting practices. Revenue was being recognized earlier than appropriate, expenses were being capitalized rather than expensed, and reserve calculations seemed optimistically low. The Fitzgerald deal particularly troubled me. It was a major contract with a technology retailer to provide our security solutions across their 400 stores. The contract had been signed, but it included significant implementation requirements and payment contingencies. Yet the full 3-year value had been pulled into the current quarter. I brought my spreadsheet analysis to Marcus, showing the proper revenue recognition schedule according to accounting standards. The Fitzgerald deal should be recognized over the implementation period, with the bulk of it coming in future quarters, I explained. Booking it all now overstates our current revenue by nearly $7 million. Marcus reviewed my analysis and sighed. You are technically correct, Kristen, but Warren has already presented these numbers to the board. Then we need to correct them, I insisted. This is not a gray area. This is a clear violation of revenue recognition principles. Let me talk to Warren, Marcus promised. In the meantime, continue preparing the quarterly statements according to the proper accounting standards. 2 days later, Marcus informed me that Warren had reviewed the contract details and determined that the current recognition was appropriate due to specific clauses regarding delivery of services. When I asked to see this analysis, Marcus could not provide it. Jessica noticed my frustration and invited me for coffee outside the office. "You are seeing what I saw last year," she said once we were safely away from workplace ears. "The aggressive accounting has been getting worse as the company pushes for the next funding round." "Have you raised concerns?" I asked. Jessica stirred her latte slowly. "I tried once. I was told that I did not understand the complexity of startup finance and that Warren had cleared everything with the audit committee. That does not make improper accounting suddenly proper," I replied. "I know," she said quietly, "but I need this job. The equity could be life-changing if we get acquired or go public." I understood her perspective but could not share it. That evening, I began documenting everything in a personal notebook, recording dates, specific transactions, accounting standards, citations, and names of people involved in each discussion. If things continued this way, I wanted a clear record of my attempts to address the issues. The next month brought announcements of an upcoming Series D funding round seeking $100 million at a valuation approaching $1 billion. The executive team held an all-hands meeting to rally the troops. "This round will put us firmly in unicorn territory," Rebecca declared to enthusiastic applause. "Everyone needs to bring their A game. Our financial performance will be scrutinized like never before, but Warren assures me our numbers tell an incredible growth story." Warren stepped forward, exuding confidence. "Our financial trajectory is exactly what top-tier investors are looking for. We just need to maintain discipline and focus for the next quarter to close this round successfully." His eyes scanned the room and briefly locked with mine. I maintained my gaze steadily, though my stomach tightened. The pressure intensified after that meeting. Department heads were given aggressive targets and told that missing them was not an option. Marketing accelerated spending to show user growth. Sales offered increasingly generous terms to close deals before quarter end. And finance, particularly accounting, felt the weight of making everything fit the narrative of exceptional growth with improving unit economics. Marcus began routing certain accounting decisions around me, assigning them to more junior team members who might ask fewer questions. When I requested to review these entries as part of my regular process, he told me to focus on my direct assignments since we were short-staffed and under deadline. I struggled with the situation daily. Nexus Wave had good products and genuine potential. Many of my colleagues were talented, ethical people building something valuable. The company did not need to distort its financials to be successful, yet an atmosphere of desperation to hit certain metrics had created a culture where accounting manipulation seemed increasingly normalized. At night, I would lie awake contemplating my options. Confronting Warren directly seemed futile and potentially career-damaging. Going above him to Rebecca appeared equally unlikely to succeed given her trust in her CFO and focus on securing the funding round. External reporting felt premature without exhausting internal options. And resignation would simply remove one of the few voices advocating for proper accounting. So, I continued documenting, raising appropriate questions in meetings, and performing my work according to professional standards, hoping that persistence and principle would eventually prevail over pressure and pragmatism. Little did I know that the situation was about to escalate from concerning to untenable. The first snowfall of December dusted the city, as I discovered the inventory valuation issues that would ultimately lead to my confrontation with Warren. While reviewing the quarterly inventory reports, I noticed that our software component values had been maintained at original cost, despite clear evidence of market price declines and technological obsolescence for several items. I spent a weekend researching proper accounting treatments, pulling relevant regulations, and calculating the appropriate inventory reserves based on our actual usage rates and market conditions. My analysis showed that we needed to write down approximately $4.2 million in inventory value to reflect reality. On Monday morning, I scheduled a meeting with Marcus to present my findings. He listened attentively as I walked through the spreadsheets and documentation. "This is thorough work, Kristen," he acknowledged, rubbing his temples. But a $4 million write-down right before our funding round would raise a lot of questions from potential investors. Not addressing it raises even bigger questions about our accounting integrity, I countered. Besides, it is the correct treatment. We cannot just ignore declining values because the timing is inconvenient. Marcus tapped his pen nervously on the desk. Let me think about how to approach this with Warren. The timing is particularly sensitive with the board meeting next week. I could see the conflict in his expression. Marcus understood the accounting requirements, but was caught between professional standards and company loyalty. I felt sorry for his position while remaining firm on mine. 2 days passed with no update. When I followed up, Marcus avoided direct answers, saying only that he was working through the inventory valuation methodology with Warren. His increasing nervousness did not inspire confidence. On Thursday, I received a direct email from Warren, requesting that I use an alternative accounting method for the inventory that would maintain current valuations based on strategic value rather than market price. The email included no supporting documentation or accounting standard references. I replied professionally but firmly explaining that the suggested approach did not comply with generally accepted accounting principles and attaching my original analysis. I offered to meet and discuss if he had additional information that might affect the calculation. Warren responded within minutes, scheduling a meeting for that afternoon. When I arrived at his office, his expression was cold. "Kristen, I understand you have concerns about our inventory accounting," he began without preamble. "But you need to understand that accounting is not just about rigid rules. It requires judgment and context." "I agree that judgment is involved," I replied. "But in this case, the evidence clearly indicates that certain inventory items are overvalued based on both market conditions and our own usage data." Warren leaned forward. "Our investors are looking at growth trajectory and market position, not nitpicking inventory valuations. These components have strategic value in our product roadmap." "Strategic value does not override accounting standards," I said. "We are required to value inventory at lower of cost or market." His face hardened. "I have been a financial executive for 15 years. I understand the nuances of startup accounting better than someone who has spent most of their career in audit. Trust me when I say this approach is standard practice in high-growth tech companies." The conversation continued in this vein, becoming increasingly tense. Warren insisted that my by-the-book approach failed to understand the unique context of startup finance, while I maintained that accounting standards existed precisely to ensure consistent treatment regardless of context. We ended at an impasse with Warren curtly telling me he would handle the inventory matter himself. I left his office with a growing sense of dread. That evening I called Jessica, needing to confide in someone who understood the situation. He basically told me to ignore established accounting principles, I vented, as if GAAP is just a suggestion rather than a requirement. "This is why I started documenting everything in my personal email," Jessica replied. "I forward key discussions to my private account with notes. Not that I plan to use it, but it helps me sleep at night." Her suggestion made sense. I had my notebook, but digital records of actual communications would be more definitive if questions ever arose. The next day I reached out to Amber, a former colleague who had left NexusWave 6 months earlier. We met for dinner at a restaurant far from the office. "I was not surprised to get your call," Amber admitted after we ordered. "The financial management was a big reason I left." "How bad was it?" I asked. Amber glanced around before lowering her voice. "Warren pressured the team to capitalize normal operating expenses to improve the bottom line. When I questioned it, I was moved to a different department within a week. 3 months later, my position was eliminated in a small reorganization that somehow only affected people who had raised concerns." Her story sent a chill through me. "Did you ever consider reporting it externally?" "I thought about it," she said. "But I needed references for my next job, and finance is a small world. Besides, I had no proof beyond my word against an established CFO." Amber's experience solidified my determination to formally document my concerns within the company system. The next morning, I drafted a detailed company memo addressing the inventory valuation issue, the proper accounting treatment, and the potential financial impact of continuing the current approach. I cited specific accounting standards, included my analysis, and emphasized the risks of material misstatement. After reviewing it carefully, I submitted it through our official documentation system, which timestamped every submission and could not be altered after the fact. The response was swift but not direct. Rather than addressing my memo, Warren began excluding me from key financial discussions. Reports that normally routed to me for review were assigned elsewhere. Team meetings happened without my knowledge until after the fact. The isolation strategy was obvious and effective. Colleagues began keeping their distance, perhaps fearing association with someone who had clearly fallen from favor. Even Jessica limited our conversations to personal topics rather than work issues. The stress began affecting my health. I experienced insomnia, tension headaches, and a constant knot in my stomach. My usually healthy appetite diminished, and I lost weight. Friends outside work noticed the change and expressed concern. Despite the personal toll, I continued performing my duties with professionalism, documenting discrepancies when I found them, and maintaining detailed records of all financial issues. If they wanted to push me out, they would need to do it directly rather than through isolation and pressure. I would not resign and make it easy for them to continue distorting the financial picture. As difficult as this period was, I had no idea that the real confrontation was yet to come and that it would change the trajectory of both my career and the company itself. January brought a flurry of activity as NexusWave prepared for the critical investor presentation that would kick off our Series D funding round. The office buzzed with energy departments scrambling to finalize impressive metrics, and the executive team rehearsing their pitch constantly. In accounting, we faced the closing of quarterly books alongside preparation of financial projections for potential investors. My role in this process had been deliberately minimized, but I still had access to the financial database and responsibility for certain reconciliations. It was during a routine review of contract dates that I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Several major customer contracts appeared to have been backdated to fall within the previous quarter, artificially inflating our reported revenue. The metadata in our contract management system showed that the documents had been created and signed in January, yet they carried November and December dates and had been included in the previous quarter's revenue. I spent that evening meticulously documenting the discrepancies, pulling system logs, showing creation dates, comparing them with the contract dates, and calculating the financial impact. The manipulated transaction dates had inflated our quarterly revenue by nearly $12 million, pushing us above the key $100 million annual run rate that investors would be looking for. This was no longer a matter of aggressive accounting interpretations. This was deliberate falsification of financial records. After a sleepless night, I requested a meeting with Warren. His assistant initially tried to defer me, claiming his schedule was full with investor preparation, but I insisted it was urgent and related to the upcoming presentation. She reluctantly scheduled 15 minutes the following morning. I arrived at Warren's office with my laptop and documentation, determined to address the issue professionally but firmly. He was on the phone when I entered, holding up a finger for me to wait while he finished his conversation. After hanging up, he glanced at his watch pointedly. I have back-to-back meetings all day preparing for the investor presentation. What was so urgent it could not wait until next week. I opened my laptop and turned it toward him. I found evidence that several major contracts have been backdated to include them in last quarter's revenue. The system metadata shows they were actually created and signed this month. Warren's expression darkened as he scanned my screen. The Fletcher Solutions and Pinnacle Media contracts alone account for $8.5 million in improperly recognized revenue, I continued. We need to correct this before the investor presentation. Warren closed my laptop suddenly, nearly catching my fingers. You spend far too much time looking for problems instead of solutions, Kristen. Those contracts were verbally agreed upon last quarter. The paperwork was simply delayed. Verbal agreements do not constitute recognizable revenue, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. And even if they did, we would need documentation of when those verbal agreements occurred, which does not exist in our records. Warren stood up, his face flushing. Do you have any idea what is at stake here? We are weeks away from a funding round that could make this company and everyone in it. The date on a contract is a technicality. It is not a technicality, I countered. It is the difference between accurate financial reporting and fraud. The word fraud hung in the air between us. Warren's eyes widened, then narrowed dangerously. You throw that word around very casually for someone who wants to continue having a career in finance, he said, his voice low and threatening. I am just trying to ensure our reporting is accurate, I said. These dates need to be corrected and the revenue moved to the current quarter. Warren slammed his hand on the desk, making me flinch. That date is an inconvenience. Find one that is not, he shouted. Do you think investors care about a few dates on contracts? They care about growth, market position, and momentum, all of which we have. They also care about honest financial reporting, I insisted, though my voice shook slightly, and regulatory compliance. Warren stared at me for a long moment, then spoke with cold precision. I want the investor deck updated with the current numbers by end of day tomorrow. That is your only priority. I cannot prepare materials that I know contain falsified information, I replied. It violates professional standards and potentially securities laws. Then you are not a team player, Kristen. And Nexus Wave needs team players at this critical juncture. His tone made the implication clear. I gathered my courage for one last attempt. I would like to discuss this with Rebecca. As CEO, she should be aware of the situation before the investor presentation. To my surprise, Warren smiled thinly. By all means. Her calendar has a 15-minute opening at 4 today. I will make sure she expects you. I spent the hours before the meeting organizing my documentation and practicing my explanation. At precisely 4, I knocked on Rebecca's office door and was called in. I was startled to find Warren already seated across from her desk. Rebecca looked tired and impatient. Warren tells me you have concerns about our financial reporting, she said without preamble. I have very limited time, so please be concise. Despite Warren's intimidating presence, I presented my findings, clearly showing the evidence of backdated contracts and explaining the revenue recognition implications. Rebecca listened without expression, occasionally glancing at Warren. When I finished, she sighed. Kristen, I appreciate your attention to detail. It is valuable in the right context. But right now, our focus must be on successfully closing this funding round. These timing technicalities can be addressed afterward if necessary. With respect, I said carefully, presenting these numbers to investors constitutes misrepresentation. It is not just a technicality. Rebecca's expression hardened. Warren has assured me that our financial reporting follows standard practices for companies at our stage. I trust his judgment and experience in these matters. I realized then that she had already decided before I walked in. Warren's slight smirk confirmed it. Now Rebecca continued. Warren tells me you have been resistant to preparing the necessary materials for our investor deck. Is that correct? I cannot prepare materials containing information I know to be inaccurate, I repeated. It violates my professional ethics. Rebecca exchanged a glance with Warren before turning back to me. I understand you feel strongly about this. However, if you cannot prioritize the company's needs at this critical time, perhaps Nexus Wave is not the right fit for you. The message was clear. Fall in line or leave. I am willing to prepare accurate financial materials, I offered as a last resort. But I cannot knowingly participate in financial misrepresentation. That will be all, Kristen, Rebecca said dismissively. Warren, please stay behind so we can discuss next steps. I left the office feeling numb. Within an hour, I was called to Human Resources, where a grim-faced director informed me that I was being terminated effective immediately for not being aligned with company goals and failing to meet performance expectations. The exit process was humiliating. My company laptop was confiscated, my access cards deactivated, and I was escorted out by security as colleagues watched wide-eyed. I was not allowed to return to my desk to collect personal items, which would be mailed to me later. The walk home through the cold January afternoon was a blur of shock and disbelief. Years of education, certification, and building a reputation for integrity had culminated in being marched out of a building for refusing to falsify financial documents. I fluctuated between anger, fear about my future, and doubt about whether I should have handled things differently. That evening, as I sat in my apartment staring at the wall, my phone lit up with a text from Jessica. I heard what happened. I am so sorry. Call me when you can. It was the only message I received from anyone at Nexus Wave. As I curled up on my couch, I wondered if I had just committed career suicide, or if standing by my principles would somehow eventually prove to be the right choice. Either way, the path forward was unclear and terrifying. The week following my termination passed in a haze of emotions. I alternated between questioning my decision, feeling angry about the injustice, and worrying about my professional future. My apartment became both sanctuary and prison as I avoided friends and ignored calls from family members asking how the new job was going. How could I explain that I had been fired for refusing to commit fraud? By the second week, the fog began to lift, replaced by a growing sense of resolve. I had done the right thing regardless of the consequences. Now, I needed to decide what to do next. My first step was consulting with an employment attorney to understand my options. Lawrence Richardson, a partner at a boutique firm specializing in workplace issues, listened carefully to my story, asking detailed questions about the financial irregularities and the circumstances of my termination. "You have a potential wrongful termination claim," he advised. "Firing someone for refusing to participate in potentially illegal activity constitutes retaliation under whistleblower protection laws." "What would that process look like?" I asked. "Lengthy and difficult," he admitted. "These cases often come down to your word against theirs, and companies have far more resources for legal battles. Nexus Wave would likely claim you were terminated for performance reasons." "I have documentation," I told him. "Emails, memos, and system metadata showing the backdating." Lawrence looked more interested. "That certainly strengthens your position. But before we discuss litigation, what is your goal here? Reinstatement, financial settlement, or something else?" His question made me pause. What did I want? Not to return to a company with such corrupt leadership. Money would help with bills while I searched for a new position, but that felt insufficient given the ethical breaches I had witnessed. "I want accountability," I finally said. "What they are doing is wrong and potentially harmful to investors who will make decisions based on manipulated numbers." Lawrence nodded thoughtfully. "In that case, there might be another avenue to consider before or alongside a wrongful termination claim." He explained that I could contact the external auditors with my documentation. As independent professionals responsible for verifying financial statements, they would be obligated to investigate credible allegations of accounting manipulation. Additionally, he continued, "If you believe securities laws are being violated in connection with fundraising activities, regulatory authorities would have jurisdiction." The idea of external reporting was both appealing and terrifying. It could create real accountability, but might also brand me as a whistleblower, potentially making future employment difficult. "Think about it," Lawrence advised as our meeting concluded. "In the meantime, I will prepare the groundwork for a wrongful termination claim to preserve that option." Over the next few days, I organized my documentation, meticulously creating a clear timeline of events, compiling evidence of the accounting irregularities, and preparing a detailed explanation of how each issue violated specific accounting standards or regulations. I decided to contact Harrison and Mueller, the external audit firm that had been working with Nexus Wave for the past 2 years. I had interacted with their team during previous audits and knew they maintained professional standards, though I wondered if they had been misled or had overlooked the issues I had found. After researching the firm's reporting structure, I drafted a careful email to Thomas Blackwell, the lead audit partner for Nexus Wave's account. Without making accusations, I explained that I had recently left the company and had documentation regarding potentially significant accounting irregularities that might affect the accuracy of financial statements. I requested a confidential conversation. His response came the next morning, professional but non-committal, suggesting a phone call that afternoon. During our conversation, Thomas was careful not to commit to any specific actions but asked thoughtful questions about the nature of my concerns. He thanked me for bringing the matter to his attention and assured me the firm took such issues seriously. I had no way to know if my outreach would lead to actual investigation or be quietly filed away. Audit firms had their own complex incentives, balancing professional responsibilities against client relationships worth millions in annual fees. With that uncertainty in mind, I also prepared an anonymous submission to the Securities and Exchange Commission's whistleblower program, detailing the financial misrepresentations and their potential impact on the upcoming investment round. While immediate SEC action was unlikely, creating an official record felt important. Just as I was finalizing this submission, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something compelled me to answer. "Kristen, it is Marcus. Do you have a moment to talk? I was stunned to hear from my former supervisor. Yes, I managed to respond. I am surprised to hear from you. I am calling from my personal phone, he said, his voice low. What happened to you was wrong. I should have supported you more strongly. Thank you for saying that, I replied, unsure. How much to reveal about my post-termination activities? The investor presentation is scheduled for February 15th, he continued. Warren has the whole finance team working overtime to prepare materials that tell the story he wants told. The backdated contracts, I asked. Those and more. He is accelerating revenue recognition across the board and deferring expenses aggressively. The projected growth curves are mathematical impossibilities given our actual metrics. I felt simultaneously validated and disturbed. Is there anything being done to address these issues internally? Marcus sighed heavily. Rebecca is fully committed to Warren's approach. She believes the funding round will solve all problems, allowing us to grow into the projections retroactively. That is not how accounting works, I said. I know. His voice was tired. Look, I am considering my options, including resigning. But I thought you should know what is happening. After thanking Marcus for reaching out, I asked if he would be willing to provide specific details about the current misrepresentations. He hesitated but agreed to send what he could safely document to my personal email. His information arrived that evening more comprehensive than I had expected. It included screenshots of the investor deck draft showing the inflated figures, internal projections, contradicting the investor materials, and emails discussing the narrative adjustment of financial data. This new evidence solidified my determination. The external auditors needed to act before investors made decisions based on fraudulent information. I compiled Marcus's materials with my existing documentation and drafted a comprehensive memo to Thomas Blackwell, detailing each discrepancy with supporting evidence. In my concluding paragraph, I wrote, "As a CPA bound by professional ethics, I cannot remain silent while knowing that material misrepresentations are being presented to potential investors. The patterns documented here are not matters of judgment or interpretation, but deliberate manipulation of financial data to create a false impression of the company's performance and prospects." Before sending it, I consulted again with Lawrence, who reviewed the memo carefully. "This is thorough and professionally presented," he acknowledged, "but you should understand the potential consequences. If NexusWave discovers you provided this information, they may pursue legal action claiming breach of confidentiality or other claims regardless of merit." "I understand the risk," I replied, "but I also understand the risk to my professional integrity if I remain silent." With that, I sent the memo knowing I had crossed a point of no return. The next day brought another surprise. Jessica called, speaking quickly and nervously. "I only have a minute," she said. "You should know that Warren is telling everyone you were fired for trying to sabotage the funding round because you were passed over for promotion. He is painting you as disgruntled and incompetent." My stomach tightened at the character assassination, but it was not entirely unexpected. "Thanks for letting me know. Are you okay there?" "Hanging in there," she replied. "But the atmosphere is toxic. Marcus is being marginalized for questioning some of the numbers, and everyone is walking on eggshells." After we hung up, I felt a complex mix of emotions: anger at Warren's smear campaign, concern for my former colleagues, and a growing anxiety about my own professional future. Would I be viewed as a principled professional or a troublemaker who could not be trusted? As the date of the investor presentation approached, I struggled with doubt and fear. Had I done enough? Too much? Would anything change? Or had I sacrificed my career for nothing? I could not have anticipated how dramatically those questions would be answered in the coming days. February 15th arrived with a snowstorm that blanketed the city in white. From my apartment window, I watched people trudging through accumulating snow, wondering if the weather would affect NexusWave's investor presentation. A part of me hoped for a postponement, buying time for my communications with the auditors to have an impact. But another part wanted resolution and end to the anxiety of waiting. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus' presentation proceeding as scheduled. "Full room of investors. Will update when I can." I paced my apartment, unable to focus on job applications or anything else. Every scenario played through my mind, from complete dismissal of my concerns to dramatic confrontation. Most likely, I thought nothing significant would happen today. Audit investigations typically moved at a deliberate pace, and the auditors might still be evaluating my information. Around 11, Marcus texted again, presentation underway. Warren showing the manipulated growth curves. No sign of auditors raising issues. My heart sank. Had my efforts been for nothing, I made coffee I did not want and tried to distract myself with mindless television. At 1:17, my phone rang. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. "You will not believe what just happened," he said, his voice, a mixture of shock and something like awe. "I had to step out to call you immediately." "What is it?" I asked, my heart racing. "The presentation was going according to plan," Marcus began. Warren was midway through his financial overview, showing the hockey stick revenue projections and improving unit economics. Rebecca had already done her vision section, and the room seemed engaged. He paused for breath. Then Thomas Blackwell from Harrison and Mueller asked to make a brief statement as the external auditor. Warren looked surprised but agreed, probably expecting a standard disclaimer about unaudited financials. I sat down, sensing what might be coming. Thomas stood up and stated that the audit firm had received concerning information regarding potential accounting irregularities that might materially affect the financial statements being presented. He said they were in the process of investigating but felt ethically obligated to disclose the existence of these allegations before investment decisions were made. "How specific did he get?" I asked. "He did not name you," Marcus continued, "but he mentioned receiving a detailed memo documenting several areas of concern, including revenue recognition, timing, expense, capitalization, and potentially backdated contracts." I closed my eyes, relief and anxiety washing over me in equal measure. Then he read the first line of your memo aloud, Kristen. The part about being a CPA bound by professional ethics who could not remain silent. He did not attribute it, but the message was clear. "How did Warren react?" I asked. "He tried to dismiss it as a disgruntled ex-employee making baseless claims. But then something incredible happened. Gerald Hammond, the lead investor from Threshold Ventures, just closed his laptop, stood up, and walked out of the room without a word. Gerald Hammond was a legendary venture capitalist whose involvement had been considered a major validation of NexusWave's potential. His silent exit spoke volumes. After that, it was chaos, Marcus continued. Other investors started peppering Warren with questions about the specific allegations. He kept trying to deflect, saying the claims were under investigation, but unfounded. But you could see the damage was done. The trust was broken. "And Rebecca?" I asked. She looked shell-shocked. I do not think Warren had prepared her for this possibility. She tried to salvage the situation by suggesting a follow-up presentation after the audit firm completed its review, but the energy in the room had completely shifted. As Marcus described the scene, I felt an unexpected emotion, sadness. Not for Warren, whose deception had been exposed, but for the company itself, and the many good people who worked there, whose futures were now uncertain because of leadership's ethical failures. The next day brought another surprise. Jessica called, speaking quickly and nervously. "The board called an emergency meeting for this afternoon," Marcus replied. "I have to get back to the office. I will update you when I can." The rest of the day passed in a blur of waiting and wondering. Around 6 that evening, Jessica called. "What happens now?" I asked. "How are people taking it?" I asked. "Mixed," Jessica admitted. "Some are worried about their jobs in the funding round. Others are saying they always knew something was off with the numbers. A few people have connected the dots to your departure and are calling you a hero." "I do not feel like a hero," I said honestly. "I just did what I thought was right." The next day brought news that trading of NexusWave's existing shares on private markets had been suspended, and the valuation had plummeted in unofficial channels. The funding round was officially delayed pending financial review, which everyone understood to mean it was dead in its current form. Marcus called with updates from the internal investigation. The forensic accountants had quickly confirmed most of my allegations and discovered additional issues I had not been aware of. The board had established a special committee to oversee the investigation and determine next steps. For 3 weeks, I heard regular updates as the situation unfolded. Warren remained on leave, though everyone expected his termination once the investigation concluded. The company entered a period of painful but necessary financial restatement, with previous quarters' results being recalculated according to proper accounting standards. Then, in mid-March, I received an unexpected call from a number I did not recognize. Kristen Patterson. This is Rebecca Torres. The CEO's voice was the last I expected to hear. Yes, I managed to respond. This is Kristen. I owe you an apology, she said without preamble. I should have listened to your concerns instead of deferring to Warren. The company is now facing the consequences of that failure. Her candor surprised me. I appreciate that, I said carefully. The investigation has confirmed everything you raised, and more, she continued. Warren has been terminated for cause, and we have reported the findings to appropriate regulatory authorities. The board has directed a complete financial restatement and overhaul of our accounting practices. That sounds appropriate, I replied, unsure where this conversation was heading. I would like to meet with you, Rebecca said, to discuss the possibility of your return to NexusWave in a senior role overseeing our financial compliance rebuilding. We need someone with your integrity and expertise to help restore trust. Her offer caught me completely off guard. Return to NexusWave. The idea seemed simultaneously validating and disturbing. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I would need time to consider it. Of course, Rebecca agreed. Take whatever time you need. The position would report directly to me with a seat on the executive team, and there would be appropriate compensation for the difficulties you experienced. After the call, I sat in stunned silence, contemplating this unexpected turn of events. The vindication was gratifying, but could I return to a company that had escorted me out for doing the right thing? Would the culture truly change, or would the pressure to show results simply manifest in new, perhaps more subtle ways? Spring brought new beginnings in more ways than one. The cherry blossoms emerged in the park near my apartment, and I found myself at a crossroads weighing Rebecca's unexpected job offer against other opportunities that had materialized once the full story of NexusWave's accounting issues became known in industry circles. After careful consideration and several frank discussions with Rebecca about governance changes and reporting structures, I ultimately declined the offer to return. While the vindication was meaningful, I recognized that rebuilding would be an uphill battle, with the company now facing class action lawsuits from investors and significant reputational damage. Instead, I accepted a position as Director of Financial Compliance at Meridian Technologies, a more established company known for its ethical leadership and transparent financial practices. The CEO, Daniel Matthews, had specifically sought me out after hearing about my stand at NexusWave. We want someone who values integrity over expediency, he told me during our final interview. That is increasingly rare and increasingly valuable. The NexusWave saga continued to unfold in the months that followed. The financial restatements revealed that the company had overstated revenue by nearly 30% and understated expenses by similar margins. The once promising unicorn valuation was slashed dramatically, though the company survived with a significantly downsized operation and emergency bridge funding. Warren faced more serious consequences. The SEC opened a formal investigation into his actions, and rumors circulated about potential criminal charges for securities fraud. His once sterling reputation in the tech finance community was irreparably damaged. Through professional connections, I learned that Marcus had also left NexusWave, taking a controller position at a smaller but ethically managed startup. Jessica stayed through the transition but eventually moved on as well, joining a nonprofit where, as she told me over coffee, the mission matters more than the metrics. Perhaps the most unexpected development came 6 months later when I received an email from Thomas Blackwell, the audit partner who had spoken up at the investor presentation. I wanted you to know that your memo has become a case study in our firm's ethics training, he wrote. While we anonymize the details, we use it to demonstrate the importance of professional skepticism and moral courage in our field. Your actions remind us all why accounting standards and professional ethics exist in the first place. His message brought tears to my eyes. In the darkest moments after my termination, I had questioned whether standing firm had been worth the personal cost. Now, I had my answer. My healing journey continued with time and perspective. The anxiety and stress that had manifested physically during my final months at NexusWave gradually subsided. I rediscovered my passion for finance as a tool for transparency and accountability rather than manipulation and deception. The experience taught me invaluable lessons about corporate ethics and my own boundaries. I learned that technical skills matter, but the courage to apply them ethically matters more. I discovered that speaking truth to power carries risks, but also brings a peace of mind that compliance with unethical demands never could. I also gained a deeper understanding of systems and incentives. The pressure to show constant growth, the allure of unicorn valuations, and the rewards for those who deliver appealing numbers create powerful motivations for ethical compromise. Recognizing these pressures helps in identifying and addressing them before they lead to outright fraud. Most importantly, I learned about my own resilience. Facing professional rejection and uncertainty was terrifying, but surviving it, and eventually thriving, built a confidence that no external validation could provide. I now know that my value comes not just from what I know, but from what I stand for. As I settled into my new role at Meridian, I occasionally reconnected with former NexusWave colleagues. Some had moved on, while others remained to rebuild. All carried lessons from the experience, though not everyone drew the same conclusions. Some still think Warren was just being aggressive, not dishonest. Jessica told me during one of our regular coffee meetings. They believe the real mistake was getting caught not cooking the books in the first place. That perspective worries me, I admitted, because it guarantees this will happen again somewhere else. But others were profoundly affected, she countered, especially the younger staff who were just starting their careers. Several told me you changed their understanding of what professional integrity looks like in practice, not just in textbooks. That impact, more than any professional advancement or vindication, remains the outcome I value most. If even a few emerging finance professionals carry those lessons forward, standing firm when pressured to compromise their integrity, then the difficult journey was worthwhile many times over. The story of NexusWave continues to evolve, as does my own. The company still exists smaller, but perhaps more sustainable, with realistic projections and transparent reporting. I continue to grow in my new role, applying the hard-won wisdom from my experience while remaining vigilant against similar pressures in new contexts. I have come to believe that integrity is not just a moral virtue but a form of freedom. The momentary relief of giving in to unethical demands comes with the lasting burden of compromise. Standing firm may bring temporary hardship, but grants the lasting liberty of being true to oneself and one's principles. As I look toward the future, I know that other ethical challenges will arise. The specific details will differ, but the fundamental choice between convenience and conviction remains constant across contexts. When those moments come, I will face them with the knowledge that doing the right thing, however difficult in the moment, leads to the life and career I can be proud of building. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to choose between what was easy and what was right? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Whether in your professional or personal life, these moments define us, and sharing them helps others find the courage to make the right choice when their time comes. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more accounts of standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that your integrity is always worth protecting, no matter the cost.